In this video, I'm going to explain to you how compensation works in your business and why it's one of the most important things you need to pay attention to. My name is Morgan Whalen. I'm a fractional CFO, and I work with a ton of business owners to make sure that they are moving in the right direction to get the profit that they want, to make the impact that they want, and really just become a better, healthier business from a financial state. One of the things that we look at is compensation because it is the biggest thing on your profit and loss statement. The big thing about getting compensation right is one, you want to avoid any type of penalties to the IRS, attracting and maintaining team members that you want, making sure you pay your team members well, and having profits left over. There's a few ways that you can pay people ranging from the least committed all the way to, I would say, the most committed. And we're going to talk about each one of these, first starting with an internship and moving all the way over into equity. One of the things you need to keep in mind while you're hiring is to pay a fair market rate. Well, what does that mean? Well, in a company, you're going to have the value that the employee or team member can provide and then the price you're paying. And hopefully you want the value to exceed the price, because if it's lower for a long period of time, then you're losing money on that person. You do that with enough people on your team and your business is going to go under. So how do you compensate them fairly for what value they're bringing to the organization? You can go online to websites like Glassdoor, PayScale, or you could talk to other business owners in your industry to see how much does this role actually pay for. When you are looking at pay structures on those websites, they're going to give you a low, a middle, average, and a high range. So it's going to be based on how much value is that person bringing to the organization versus how much you have to pay them. Another thing to consider is the location, because if they're an in-person team member, then you're probably going to have to look at pay rates that are closer to what that area or what that state is paying for that specific role. If you're hiring someone remote, then you can look at national averages. And if you're hiring someone internationally, you may want to look at that country or that specific part of that country that you're hiring from to give you a better estimate of pricing and value in that specific area. Another thing to keep in mind as you look at hiring team members is that there is a ramp-up time. So typically when you hire someone, very rarely on day one, are they going to be providing more value to you than they are costing you. Why? Because you have to train them. You have to get them to understand your way of doing things. It could be 30 days, it could be 60 days, it could be for like really specific jobs, maybe up to a year before they fully ramped up to performing at the highest level possible. The value that they bring to the company will plateau over time unless you have some type of structure, some type of way for them to increase that value. So if you're hiring someone for, let's just say like a social media manager role, once they learn the job and they learn position, then you either have to give them new roles and responsibilities because your company continues to grow and now they're no longer the social media manager, but now they're a marketing manager, or they can shift into a different position within the company. That's not necessarily have to be a manager, but stay in a technical role, but a technical role that can add more value to the company, or they can expand into other platforms. Right? They just did one platform, they could go into a second one. When you first start, it's actually flipped. The value that they're providing to the company or whatever role they are is actually lower than the price. And then as you ramp them up over time, that those two lines cross and now they're providing more value than it costs. And that margin in between is the profits that the company can enjoy. Now, the goal, especially as the business owner over time, is how can I get them to step up and add more and more value? But you always want to have that gap there between the value they bring to the company and the price at which you're paying them for. Once they get to a certain point and they learn their job, what used to take them 40 hours then becomes 30 hours. And then they get even better and 30 hours becomes 20 hours. And then they get even better and they go 20 hours to 10 hours. And so if you're not staying on top of the individual as far as what they're bringing and producing for the company, it can look like on paper pretty steady. They're bringing in a good amount, but in reality, they're spending less and less time. You want to be very, very careful of that. And again, find ways for that dead time, that dead space to be used up inside the company for other things. So they can learn other skills, they can transition and take on adjacent roles, things like that. But there's usually often a lot of slack within a company. The compensation, again, we start with intern, and the intern is someone who is looking to gain skills, to gain experience. And they're usually, in college still at this point, or maybe just out of high school, didn't go to college. And so these people, especially if you're starting your company, could be really helpful because they're extra hands without the cost to you as the business owner. You'd go to, local colleges, or, you might just put out some posts and see who's interested, because a lot of people at that age, they're still living at home. So they don't have a cost of living really. So they could take those jobs and take those positions where there's no pay, but they're learning a skill, they're getting the experience, and that's going to make them more valuable into the next thing they do, or they could stay with you and move into a paid position. So that's number one, which is the intern. The second thing we have is hourly. In hourly, you can either have an independent contractor or W-2. And so there's a lot of back and forth on what's an independent contractor, what's a W-2 or an employee. And so I'm going to read directly from the IRS's website so you could see exactly what the difference is. An employee is generally considered anyone who performs services if the business can control what will be done and how it will be done. What matters is that the business has the right to control the details of how the worker services are performed. Independent contractors are normally people in independent trade, business, or profession in which they offer their services to the public. So to sum it up really quickly, W-2 is you control the hours which they work, you control how they do their job, you provide benefits and usually the tools and the resources for them to do their job. An independent contractor runs their own business, technically, it could be a sole proprietorship, sets their own hours, sets their own hourly pay, and usually provides the tools and resources to do the job themselves. So that's the difference. So if you're hiring independent contractors, you can definitely do that to start your business, but you just definitely don't want to cross-pollinate and call someone an independent contractor who's really an employee. So if you're unsure, I will leave a link down below so you can get the full checklist on the IRS website to determine if the person you have on your team is an independent contractor or an employee. So the big thing here is that as an independent contractor, they're more removed. They're less committed to the company at this point. They can take on 3, 5, 10 other clients that aren't necessarily just working with you individually. So think, when you go on Fiverr and those types of websites where you have a skill and you're like, I'm a web designer. Okay, you go in, you hire them for a project, you hire them for a job, and that's really it. That's really what an independent contractor is. The next stage is W-2 hourly, or an employee who is hourly. So at this point, you're getting the benefits, you're getting the pay. This person, again, is less committed to the company, but it's one step closer because now they have maybe some paid time off, they have some benefits that they get from the company, depending on how many hours that they work. The next one after that is salary. And so salary means the company is expecting them to work around a 40-hour work week, and they're going to get paid guaranteed every paycheck a certain amount of dollars, plus benefits, plus paid time off if that's available, health insurance and coverage, 401k, like whatever other benefits that are in that package also be available to the salaried employee. Now, the issue that salaried employees usually have is that once they learn their job, like I said before, then there's no motivation for them to learn anything else because they're already getting paid. And if they're happy with the pay as is, there's no other desire, there's no other incentive structure in place. Charlie Munger, who's a famous investor, said, show me the incentives and I will show you the outcomes. And so if the incentive on a salary worker is just to show up and put in your 40 hours and leave, that's all they're going to do. And once they know, okay, I need to do it to this level, this standard, that's all they're going to do it to because there's nothing else motivating them typically. Now, there are some outliers who are very performance-based and they want to achieve and they want to continue to rank up in the company. But for a lot of people, once they hit a certain income level, they're good. So you want to make sure that you're adding in extra incentives for these individuals. And that's where we get into the next stage. So after they're an employee, you can then offer, and sometimes as an independent contractor, you can offer these too, but then you can introduce bonuses, you can introduce profit sharing, and you can introduce commissions. A bonus is usually a one-time thing that occurs, and it's typically to reward an individual performance or a department or a team. Take, for example, in California, there was an earthquake in Santa Monica, and it actually ruined the freeway, the I-10 freeway. And so there was a company who won the contract to repair that highway. What the government did was they said, all right, we're going to give a set date, which I believe was 140 days. And if you can complete the project in any time less than 140 days, you're going to get a $200,000 bonus per day that the project gets completed. However, they said every day after day 140 that you take to build this road, it's going to cost the company $205,000 in penalties and in fees. And they actually completed the project in 66 days. And so that's $200,000 times 74, because that's how many days in advance that they completed it. And they ended up clearing over 13 million. So again, you can drive this performance, you can drive these efforts if you align your compensation correctly. And that's what you want to do with your business. You want to get people to not only work the 40 hours, but then ask, how can I get to that next level? And if they do push themselves past, the 40 hours or what they are expected to do, then you want to compensate them for that. And that will reward that effort, and other people will see that and they'll also want that too. These bonuses are usually tied to some type of metric. You don't want to just say, hey, you get a bonus for showing up. You want them to be able to push themselves past a certain point. So it could be seeing so many clients. It could be getting the project done in a certain amount of time. All those things are metrics that you can do. Now, what I would suggest doing is, one, making sure you have paired metrics. And paired metrics are a performance-based metric plus a quality metric. And so if all you say is, I need you to get the road done as quick as possible, that's great. But then what if the quality is terrible? What if it breaks down in 2 years, 3 years? It still needs to be to a certain standard. So you'd want to compensate based off a quality metric and a quantity or performance metric. And that way you're not just aligning incentives towards one and not the other. So the second type is commission-based pay. And this is usually seen or most common in the sales department. And so what will happen is, as sales come in, they'll get a percent of the cash collected or the revenue, whatever the business model looks like. The salesperson is usually aligned very closely with how well they do their job. This is why in sales, they're usually high risk but high reward. Sales is the part that's the hardest. It's to get the people to commit, to get the people to buy from you. And so they're rewarded usually the most, and it's as close to the actual event happening as possible. So the commission happens right after the event. Usually within a few weeks, they're getting a commission check. There's many, many different ways that you could set up your commission structure, but typically one that I like is you reward those, again, who are the highest performers. You would say, I know on average for my business, my industry, that these results are the average results that you should get. Great. So then you'll get average commission at those results. If you exceed those results, then I'm going to give you even higher level commission. And if you're like the top percent, then you get even a higher commission. Why? Well, if you have someone who's in that top percentile and you're giving them a higher commission, guess what? Now you could say to everyone else who comes to the company that wants to be a salesperson, hey, we give out up to 200,000, 500,000 in salary, $1 million in salary, right? So when you set that high, then you're going to have more people that want that. There's a goal that they can now attain. They're like, how do I get from where I'm at the bottom to being one of the high performers, getting a higher percentage of the commission? Another thing to consider when looking at commission structure is, how does it affect the business overall? So if the salespeople are selling, this is called big ticket items, but there's really low margin because it costs so much for the company to fulfill, that may not be as good as things that they sell at maybe a lower price, but are better margin for the company and make more profit. So you can see how, well, the salesperson wouldn't care because now they're only basing off the commission, the sale, but it may hurt the company in the long run to have barely any profit and taking on all this extra work. So you definitely want to consider, what am I incentivizing and what product line, what service, so you can get something that has high profit margins, ideally, less drag on the fulfillment and the team on the back end, and also helps the salesperson be able to close more. The last one is profit sharing. And so profit sharing usually is on an annual basis. Sometimes you'll do quarterly, sometimes even monthly. But a profit sharing model is one where the company makes a certain amount, and as long as it's over a certain threshold of profits, then typically, everyone gets a bonus at the end of the year. That's the end of year Christmas bonus. So the difference between profit sharing and bonus, I want to distinguish between the two. Usually profit sharing is across the entire organization, and everyone is involved in that. And that incentivizes more of a team aspect, whereas a bonus typically is more on a department or an individual. And so it's more individual effort than it is for team effort. But either one is a good combo to help with aligning the incentives with what you want them to focus on, what you want the performance level to be inside your company. So you either have regular hourly salary, and that's pretty much you're giving away cash for time. You have bonus, which is if you perform these things and you hit certain KPIs, you're going to get rewarded. And then you have equity, which is shares or ownership in the company itself. And what does that do? That drives long-term commitment. This is the most long-term commitment that you have, because now the employee or the team member is now aligned with the longer company goal of how do we make this thing more profitable? How do we increase the enterprise value? How do we get this thing to sell in a few years? You're aligning with more of the long-term vision and goal of the company. And this is usually great for startups that don't have the amount of cash to bring on some of the talent that they want. They can exchange some equity in the company. And a good trick with this is to have a vesting period. It could be 3 years, 4 years, where as long as they stay with the company over that time, then they get a certain percent of the shares that they were guaranteed when they first joined the company. So if it was 1,000 shares and it was, equally across 3 years, then the first year they complete with the company, they get 333, and then the next one, now they're at 666, and so on and so forth. Each year that equity can be negotiated, renegotiated again, but essentially you have those three main things. You either have the salary or hourly that you can play with to give them more cash now. And so that might be for someone who is more dependent on that because of their family. They got to pay off bills. They just need a lot of cash now. Then people who are like, you know what? I really want to have the opportunity to get even more inside the company, but it's delayed a little bit. It's not guaranteed, but it's based on your performance. That's when you get into commissions, bonuses, and profit sharing. And then those who are more aligned with the long term and say, you know what? I know this thing can 5x, 10x in value over the next 2-3 years, and I'd rather wait for my payoff down the line whenever this company sells. That's more of your equity play. And so you have a combination of all these things that you can do inside your company to make sure you're compensating people well, you're maintaining a profit, and you are able to grow the company in the direction that you want it to go in. If you think about this from the employee side, you may be right now in the hourly and you're asking yourself, how do I get to like a salary? There's a quote by Elon Musk. He says, you get paid in direct proportion to the difficulty of problems you solve. If you are someone who can solve complex problems, and not a lot of people could do it, guess what? You're not going to be hourly for very long. You're going to get the salary, you're going to get the bonus, you're going to get the commissions, whatever it is, depending on where you're at inside the company. So just look at it as always think about, what are the skills that I have? What are the skills that I'm learning? And from an employee standpoint, again, if you can add more value to the company, if your skills are rare and they can get the company to reduce their cost or increase how much is coming in, then you're going to be able to command a higher salary over time. As the employer, you want your employees and team members to get more valuable over time. So from your perspective, it's going to be, okay, how can I educate them? How can I get them to acquire more skills? How can I teach them things like leadership and maybe using some software? From the employee side or the team member side, it's what skills can I learn to become more valuable if I do want an increase? Again, that's not the only thing to consider. Your happiness, your passion for what it is that you're doing, those things also play a role. So don't just think I need to go for the most money possible, because you can end up with a life that's miserable. Feel it out and see, okay, what am I passionate about? What do I enjoy learning? And then move in that direction. The whole idea is to align your pay and your incentive with where you want your company to go as a business owner. So if you can do that, you're going to get your people to stay longer. You're going to get your people to want to work more hours, give discretionary effort, and eventually grow the company into something that is magical. Now, there's other things outside of pay, right? You need to have a foundation of leadership. You need to know how to have difficult conversations. You need to know how to communicate well. There's all these other things, but I'm just giving you the thought when it comes around compensation and money and how to use it to best grow and scale your company. Hopefully this was helpful to you. If you did, go ahead and leave a thumbs up, leave a like, and we'll keep on making more content. If you had any questions, go ahead and leave a comment down below, and I'll catch you on the next one.